Hello and welcome to video number 2 in the Quantitative Surveys video series. Today we're going to be talking about Qualtrics, how to get yourselves signed up and get your survey deployed and created in Qualtrics. Next we'll talk about creating a new project. Once you're logged into Qualtrics, the first thing you want to do is go up to the right top corner of the screen, select that blue button there, Create New Project. You'll have a couple of options here. You can use some pre-built templates, but we'll just start with a blank slate. So create our own and then go ahead and select Survey. From there, you'll give your project name a title. For the purposes of this activity, we're just going to call it Engagement. Go ahead and click on the blue Get Started button, and you'll see that Qualtrics has gone ahead and created your survey, starting with a default question block there right at the top. The primary way that Qualtrics organizes your survey is through what are called these blocks. And you can see you have your first default question block available on the screen there. In terms of managing your blocks, let's go ahead and take a look at how we can make it a little bit more insightful and intuitive for our uses. So go ahead and click on the XM logo in the top left corner of your screen. That's going to bring up your project home base. You can see all the different surveys that you've created there. And of course, over time, you'll collect more surveys and you'll want to manage those and kind of organize them a little bit better that makes more intuitive sense for you. So let's add a new folder, and for this demonstration, we'll call it HRD 6355. You can see it pops up in the screen there, and then we'll go ahead and drag our survey that we just created, the engagement survey, right into that HRD 6355 folder. Now we can relaunch our survey and start working on the actual work of creating our survey. It's really easy to add blocks. Right at the bottom of that first block is the option to add an additional block. So let's go ahead and add some blocks in here. We can start building the skeleton structure for our survey. And if we happen to add one too many blocks and we want to go ahead and delete one, that's easy as well. Over on the right-hand side, you'll see that drop-down option with block options. The very last option there is delete box, block rather. And that's going to give you a little pop-up window with a warning to make sure that you want to permanently delete that block. So double check that that's what you want to do and then click that red delete button. That's going to be deleting the box for you. Now we can also add names to our blocks to make it a little bit more neat and tidy and organized for how we're laying out our survey. So let's go ahead and change our first block to DVB. We'll make our second block consent. And actually we pause here and say we want this reordered. We want to have our consent block as the first block, not the second one. So changing the order of your blocks is easy as well. Back over on the right-hand side with block options, go ahead and click that drop-down option and then select Move Block Up, and that's just going to reorder the blocks for you. So if you get them out of order or you just want to change things around, feel free to use that moving block option there and just move them up or down. Continuing along, we've got an IMC, or instructional manipulation check. Block number 3 becomes the IVB. And lastly, we've got our demographics block. Now that we have all of our blocks organized, arranged, and named, we're ready to start adding the content, the actual meat of the survey, to these blocks. All right, so let's start here with our DVB block. And the first thing we want to do is select the type of question that this is going to be. So it defaults, at least with this first initial default block, to a multiple choice question. We want to change that to a Likert style. Now you can see as we click that, a number of different options pop up. We can slide through different options and choices there. Again, we're going to go with a matrix table, which is the setup for the Likert style. So select matrix table. And then we're going to adjust the number of statements and scale points. So statements first, these are the choices, the questions that we're going to ask. And so we have 5 of those. So we can just click that plus button up to 5 statements. And next we're going to adjust our scale points. So for this survey question, we have 6 scale points. So we'll go ahead and click the plus sign to add up 6 scale points. Now we can start adjusting the language and writing in our own scale options. Of course, our first one is to no extent, and then we can start adding in the rest of those just the same. And then we'll write our question. So our first choice, we'll go ahead and click there, type in our first choice, and you can see the rest fill in all together. Now the question text at the top of that block there can be adjusted as well. So we'll just copy and paste all the instructions for that particular question. Now what we want to do is add the copyright notice just below this question. So we're going to do that by clicking this green plus sign here at the bottom. And then we're going to adjust that question type from a multiple choice to just descriptive text. That's going to change it from a question to basically just a text box. You can write anything in there that you'd like. We're going to go ahead and click on that, highlight the text, and then go into HTML view. So this is a way that we can add that copyright symbol so it looks professional. So we want to add the ampersand and then the word copy, all together, no spaces. And again, that's an HTML view. We switch back to normal view. You can see that that is input, that copyright symbol. And we're ready to type in the rest of our copyright statement, in this case, the Ken Blanchard Companies, all rights reserved and do not duplicate. There's one more setting that we want to adjust for this particular question. That is a force response. So Qualtrics by default does not require a respondent to answer every single question that's displayed on the screen or any of the questions really. But in order to force them to answer the question or to make a selection, we can go ahead and click this box here that says force responses. That's going to prevent the respondent from advancing through the survey unless they have responded to each question. So you definitely want to select that. I shouldn't say definitely, that's one option that you have, a choice that you can make as a researcher. But I believe for the purpose of this assignment, you'll want to force responses so you don't have to deal with missing data once you get to the end of your data collections. Go ahead and click force response there. All right, so let's go ahead and input our demographic questions now. You can see we've got the block set up already for demographics. We're going to select create a new question. And for these, we're going to start with a descriptive text so we can sort of give an introduction to this segment. Here we can go ahead and type in our instructions for this assessment or this block. We're going to start by saying, please answer the following general questions about yourself. Remember, none of this information is tied to your identity. I'm going to add another question, this time a multiple choice question, a little bit different than the Likert matrix that we did before. We'll start by asking gender, so we'll say, please indicate with which gender you identify. Go ahead and start with our first one, male, there, and you can see when we tap the tab button, it'll take us to the next field and automatically fill it in with female, as well as non-binary, third gender, and prefer not to say. Now for the purposes of this survey, we're going to delete that fourth option, the prefer not to say. If we look over here on the right side, we can see why those automatic choices popped up. So Qualtrics has it built in, it knows that people are oftentimes asking this same question, so it automatically will populate it for us. If we want to reduce the choices down to just 3, we need to first deselect the automatic choices, and then you can see that we can reduce the number of choices or increase them to whatever number we would like. Our next question is also going to be multiple choice. We'll type in, please indicate your ethnicity. First option is Hispanic or Latino. Second option is not Hispanic or Latino. You can see we have a third option there, but we don't need it since there were no automatic choices. We can go ahead and reduce that to just 2 choices. Again, create a new question, multiple choice. And here we will ask to please indicate your race. You can check one or more boxes. So a little bit different with this option. They can select multiple options from here. So I'll show you how to do that. Pretty simple. On the right-hand side, you just go instead of single answer to multiple answer, and that's going to change your radio buttons, the round selectors, into squares so that the respondent can select as many as he or she wants. First option we'll type in is white, then black, and you can see as we start to type this in, the rest of it gets populated automatically by Qualtrics. And again, notice that you've got squares there instead of the round radio buttons. So that's, again, is going to allow them to select multiple options if they so choose. Last element we'll go over is adding in your consent. So this is your IRB language where we are indicating that the respondent has consented to take the survey. So back up at the top in the consent box, we're going to create a new question. It's going to be a multiple choice question with just 2 options. Now the easiest way to do this here is to write out your text in a separate either Word document or a notepad or something, and then just copy and paste it right into the box there. If you want to modify any of the text, for example, underlining, adding bold, you can select that Rich Content Editor tab, and that's going to switch to more of a familiar interface where you can select underlining, bold, and so on. Now for the first option, we'll go ahead and type in agree, click tab, and go ahead and go into disagree for the second option. And then we can reduce choices to just 2 since they need to either agree or disagree to this consent. Let's talk about bot and attention checks. We can also refer to an attention check as an IMC or instructional manipulation check. The intent with both of these is to ensure that number 1, we've got humans actually taking our survey, and number 2, that that individual or that respondent is actually responding to the survey questions and not just randomly clicking responses through the questions. Now we know that not all MTurk workers are middle-aged men living in their mother's basements, but there are some, and so we want to use bot and attention checks to help eliminate or reduce as much as possible these individuals from clogging up our results. The first thing we're going to do is add a bot check towards the beginning of our survey. So here we can see our survey block with the consent form, and right there at the top of the survey we're going to go ahead and add that bot check. Again, a bot check is basically a way of us ensuring that we've got a human responding to our survey and not an automated software program or some type of computer or algorithm that's just randomly responding to the survey. So this is a question that is designed to be difficult for computers but very easy for a human to respond to. So to start building this question, we're going to click the option to create a new question, and we're going to build this as a multiple choice question. So go ahead and select that there. We'll write our question text. What is the third word in this question? How many stars are in the American flag? So an easy question, the answer is right there on the screen. The answer is stars. But rather than just having words, we're going to upload pictures for each of these options. Now we've only got 3 as a default, so let's go ahead and increase our number of choices to 4. And we'll select Force Response. And then we can start to upload our images. So we just click on that down arrow to the right of the option choice and select Insert Graphic. We can then upload a new graphic, choose the file, browse on our computer to find the graphic that we want to upload. Of course, we'll make available to you all these image files here. We're going to start with the number 13, again as an image file, and we'll just select Choose for Upload, and then click Save. We'll go ahead and repeat that process with the remaining 4 options. Before we do that, let me remind you that we do need to delete that where it says Click to Write Choice 1, 2, 3, and 4. Just go ahead and delete that, highlight it, and delete it so we have just the images there. A little bit cleaner presentation. And there we have our finished bot check. And again, this is a question that is easy for humans and difficult for computers, so it's going to help ensure that we have actual human beings responding to our survey. The next piece that we're going to add is the instructional manipulation check. So we'll go ahead and scroll down here about to the midpoint of our survey. And this is a good spot to put the IMC because we're about halfway through the survey, and so we want to double check that our respondents are actually reading the instructions for each of these questions and responding in a way that we expect them to. That is, following the instructions. So we're going to create this question in such a way that if the instructions are followed, the respondent will be able to continue the survey and have no ill effects. If, however, they're just responding to random Likert questions and selecting an option at random, then this will reveal that. So let's go ahead and start building the question. It'll kind of become obvious exactly what we're doing and how this works as we construct it. So the first thing we're going to do is select the question, and then we want to change from the default of being a multiple choice to that matrix option, the same that we used for the earlier Likert questions. But one difference, rather than a Likert matrix, we want to do a bipolar matrix. So go ahead and select bipolar matrix. We're going to go up here and adjust the number of skill points. Rather than just 3, we're going to increase this all the way up to 9 skill points, and decrease the number of statements down to just 1. We also want to increase the number of labels, putting that up to number 9 as well. So we have 9 labels, 1 label for each of the skill points. Next, we'll come over and adjust the language for each of those skill points. So we'll just highlight the text, delete it, and replace it with the number 1. You can tab across and input the rest of the numbers. We'll go ahead and click on writing choice number 1, and we'll change that to very rarely. And on the right-hand side there, we're going to change that to very frequently. So it appears that the respondent is going to be selecting a Likert response from 1 to 9, the frequency with which they do something. We're going to make them read the question text, or at least we hope that they read the question text. And there we're going to say, please click on the little blue circle at the bottom of the screen. Do not click the scale items that are labeled from 1 to 9. So here you see that instructional manipulation check. We want to see if they actually are reading those instructions and responding appropriately by clicking the little blue circle, rather than selecting one of the options from the Likert scale. The next step is to add in that little blue circle. So we're going to add an additional question, and we can do that by just clicking the green Create a New Question button. Of course, that defaults to a multiple choice, so we can go up and reduce the number of choices down to just 1, because this is that forced response for the little blue circle. So just 1 choice, And then just like we did with the bot check at the beginning, we're going to click the little down arrow to the right-hand side and insert a graphic. We can then browse our computer, locate the graphic, upload a new graphic, choose the file. There's the blue dot. Choose for upload and save. Finally, we can just delete the text from that question. But rather than just delete it, because that's just going to leave the text there if we close the window, we're actually going to put a space in. So just hit your space bar one time, that'll save it as a space and it'll just remove any of that text so it just appears to be a blue circle. The idea being the blue circle just is kind of innocuous, it doesn't appear to be anything, and so if a respondent is not reading the instructions to click the blue circle, they're probably just going to speed through it and select one of those like it responses. And then you'll see in a subsequent section we can actually have a message that pops up and lets the respondent know that we know that they're not reading the instructions. And so we'll cover that logic in the next section here, but for now, you've just created your first instructional manipulation check. The question export tags is a simple little process that we can go through that'll make our lives a lot easier, decrease the drama, and just make data processing a lot easier once we get to that step. Basically what it does is just changes the titles for each of the columns that we're going to download as the CSV file once we've collected all of our data. So Qualtrics automatically assigns just sort of a random variable. I think it's a Q and then a number for whatever that question number is. Rather than that default, we probably want to change that to something that's a little bit more meaningful to the survey that we're conducting. So we'll start by clicking the little gear icon in one of our questions, and we can do this for each of the questions that it applies to. And we're just going to go down and select Recode Values. That's going to open up a pop-up window, and you can see there the blue column towards the left where we see the default question numbering that Qualtrics adds. We can highlight and select and change those to something that's more meaningful for us. So for this example, we'll just do IV 1 through 3 and then WI 4 and 5. So now when we download our CSV file, the column headers for those responses will be more meaningful to us and we'll be able to see and understand our data much more easily. So we just do that step now on the front end and it'll save us a lot of drama on the back end. In this segment, we're going to go under the hood, so to speak, in Qualtrics and talk about some of the survey flow, skip logic, and also how to capture MTurk Worker IDs. I say it's under the hood because this is some of the behaviors and actions that Qualtrics will take behind the scenes to kind of manage the way that the survey is presented to respondents. One of the first things we're going to look at is survey flow. So rather than give the entire survey to everybody for all situations, we want to have the survey behave in a certain way that it kind of adapts to the respondent as they respond. For example, with our very first question, we've got a bot check. And we don't need to send up and show the entire survey to a bot or a computer that's taking it. And so what we want to do is set up a situation where if that very first question indicates that it's a bot taking the survey, then it stops the survey right there and goes to the end. So we want to set up a survey flow, a situation where the survey will flow or adapt to that individual's response based on their answer to that very first question. So we'll go ahead and click on the question. We can see here that we're looking for them to respond with stars. And then we're going to go up and set up the survey flow. So at the top of your screen there, click on survey flow. And what you see right now is that the survey flow is set up so that there's just the 5 blocks for the survey. We're going to add some additional conditions that'll make the survey behave a different way based on the responses. So underneath that first block, the consent block, we're going to add below. So we're going to add a condition below that question. And here we can see that Qualtrics is asking us, what do we want to do or what do we want to add? And we want to add a branch, so kind of a left or right. So if you think of like a flow chart or some type of hierarchy chart, we want to have a branch right underneath that first block where there's going to be some conditions. And if these conditions are met, the survey is going to behave a little bit differently. So we're going to select add a condition and then select the question that that condition is going to apply to. So we can see that question 6 there, the very first question, is the one that we want to add that condition to. So what is the third word in this sentence? So that's the question. And then what's the choice? What is it that we want to trigger this action? Now you can do this a couple different ways based on how you have your question set up. Now we noticed in the first part that the correct response there is number 4, stars, the word stars. So we want them to choose that. So we can say choice number 4 is selected, and that would be the trigger. In this case, since that is the correct answer, we want to select is not selected. So now if we kind of think through the logic and just kind of read straight across here, for question number 6, what is the third word in the sentence? If choice number 4 is not selected, then something different is going to happen. We're not just going to proceed with the survey as it was expected. And now you'll remember that first block, the consent block, actually has 2 questions. So we've got the bot check first, and then the second question is our consent to our IRB procedures and basically the consent to take the survey. So we're going to add a second condition, an additional condition. So we can choose between and or. So here we can select the question. In this case, question number 14 there says welcome to the survey and so on. That's our consent question. And then the choice, if agree or disagree, we're going to go with disagree. Is selected, then we're going to have the condition met. So 2 conditions. If they do not respond correctly to the bot check, or they disagree with the consent, then we're going to trigger this special response versus continue with the survey. So there we're going to add a new element, and we want to set them right to the end of the survey. And that makes sense, right? Because if a person is not a person, they're a bot, we don't want to continue the survey, we want to end it right there. Or if the person does not consent to the survey, we also want to end the survey right there. So we selected end the survey, and that's it. The last piece is once the survey is completed, we're going to also have an end of survey. So once they complete, we're going to give them that message that gives them the code that they can enter into MTurk. And we'll talk more about that once we get into the MTurk video. But for now, just know that we need an end of survey at the end of the survey. And eventually we're going to customize these messages in a later segment. But for now, we're just focusing on the logic and actually applying those conditions to trigger this different reaction of the survey. So that's survey flow. Let's talk about survey logic. Survey flow changes the path that a respondent takes through the survey. In the example we just completed, the respondent would flow from the consent box directly to the end of the survey because he or she did not answer the bot or consent question correctly. Survey logic is more about changing the behavior of the survey dynamically. So as a personal example, I conducted a research study where I needed to determine if an individual had been identified as a high potential employee. So this required a series of sequential questions based on the individual's response to the previous question. First, I'd ask if their employer had a high potential program. If the answer was no, the Qualtrics logic would just send them to the next block in the survey. But if they answered yes, they'd be presented with an additional question. Were you eligible for participation in this high potential program? And based on the response to that question, the logic again would either display an additional question or send them on to the next block. But with this logic, I was able to categorize my respondents and see what the responses and determine which questions they would see in the survey. So that's the difference between flow and logic. In short, survey flow changes the path through the survey, where survey logic changes the survey itself that the respondent will get. Let's look at an example of using survey logic. In our survey, we have an IMC, or instructional manipulation check. As you can see here, it's the question with the blue dot. The first thing we want to do is ensure that this question appears on a single page. So based on the respondent's device or browser settings, Qualtrics might split up a series of questions over multiple screens, and we want to make sure that it all shows up on one screen. So we can add a page break before and after the IMC questions to make sure that they all appear on one page. We can add a page break by first selecting the question and then clicking Add Page Break. Then we can use the up arrow over here on the left-hand side to move that page break above the question. And we can then click on the blue dot question and select Add Page Break to add it at the bottom there. Now next, we want to create a message that will appear for individuals who don't correctly respond to the IMC. So we're going to click Create a New Question and select Multiple Choice. Now, before we build this question, let's go ahead and add the display logic. The trigger that will cause this question to appear is really what the display logic is what triggers that question to appear. Now, like survey flow, we want to set the conditions that will trigger this logic. So for the IMC, we want the respondents to click on the blue dot. But if they click on any number of the bipolar responses there, the 1 to 9, we want to trigger this new question. So we're actually going to go through and create 9 conditions, one for each option. You're probably thinking it would be easier and faster to just set the logic to require the person to select the blue dot. However, we can't use a forced response in either the bipolar question or the blue dot question. That would defeat the purpose of the IMC. But we do want to force them to respond to at least one of those two questions, and that's why we need the more complex logic with all these different conditions. We're going to add one more condition here, so condition number 10, and of course that is if the blue dot is not selected. Now, the last step is to change the AND statements to OR statements, since any of these conditions should trigger the new question. Lastly, we'll click Save. Now we can go ahead and build the question, and to be fair, you can create the question first and then apply the logic. Either way works fine. For this question, we actually just want to show them a message and allow them to consciously choose to continue or exit the survey. So I'm going to copy and paste the message into the text box. And next I'll reduce the number of choices to just one and type OK as a response. Now for this question, I do want to select force response. Now since we have already added a survey flow condition, this next piece is not entirely necessary, it's more for demonstration. I'm showing it more as a variation of the survey flow. As an alternative to the survey flow, we could add a condition to the bot check question. We click to select the question and then select Add Skip Logic. For the condition, it actually appears as a blank list since we're using images and not text. But we know that the last option is the correct one, so we'll choose that. We could then switch to Is Not Selected, and then choose our Skip To logic and select End of Block. And you'll recall that the end of the block is the end of the survey, which we added as part of the survey flow. One of the problems with MTurk data collection is that sometimes MTurkers will repeatedly take the same survey, and so we want to screen out those kind of duplicate submissions from the same individuals. Now this won't make a whole lot of sense by itself, but this is one part of a multi-step process that's going to help us to collect the MTurk Worker's ID, and then during our data cleaning process we can go through and either clean those out or handle them however we want to. But we want to go ahead and complete this step now while we're in Qualtrics and developing our survey. What we're going to do is go back into the survey flow area, and we want to add an additional box or kind of action here. We're going to click Add Below and then Embedded Data. Basically what this is doing is adding a little code into our Qualtrics survey that we're later on going to match up with some code in our MTurk, and together those codes will collect behind the scenes automatically the MTurk Worker's ID and add that to our Qualtrics results. So in the Set Embedded Data box, just go ahead and highlight there where it's Create New Field or Choose from dropdown. Now you could go through and search for this, and it's somewhere in that list, but the faster way is to just highlight all the text and type in MID, Mike India Delta. That MID is the code that you need to collect the MTurk Worker's ID. So that's all there is to it. You can actually put this anywhere in the survey. I just, as a rule of practice, have been putting it towards the top of the survey. Go ahead and put that Set Embedded Data there and then click Save Flow. At this point, we want to add some customized messages that we can use for our end of survey messages. There's really two messages that we're going to develop. The first is what I refer to as decline, and that's for individuals that either fail the bot check, fail the consent form, or any other reason are not going to complete the survey. So these are the individuals who will not receive the Qualtrics code, will not be able to be compensated in MTurk. It's just kind of we're declining their participation in the survey. The second one is the successful completion. So this is where they will get that Qualtrics generated code and they have successfully completed the full survey. So to complete, or rather to develop these customized messages, we want to go into our survey, and then up towards the top there, we're going to click on Library. Library is going to pull up all of our resources. And you can see across the left there, we've got a survey library, a graphics library. That's where our bot check images are being stored. We also have a files library, and lastly, a messages library, which is where we want to go in now. So go ahead and click on that. Then go up to the top right there, the green button, select New Message. And the message type for this, of course, is going to be an end of survey message. So go ahead and select that. If you wanted to, you can set up folders ahead of time and organize this. Not entirely necessary right now, but that's where you can organize it by folder. Put in a meaningful description or title for it. I just titled mine very simply Decline. and then put in a simple message there, whatever you want to come up with. I put something along the lines of, your response has been recorded. You don't meet the criteria as described in the HIT to participate in the survey, so thanks for your time. Try to keep it positive, upbeat, and just let them know that their participation has come to an end. And go ahead and click the green Create Message button. We'll repeat that same process, this time for the successful end of completion. So again, it's an end of survey message. We can type in the title there. I just use MTurk. And then we're going to add in the message. You can put in whatever you want there. The key piece here is that last line, starting with the $sign. That is the code that's going to generate the Qualtrics response code. And we can see that when we actually practice and study the survey itself in the preview. But for now, just know that that's the code that you need to enter at the very end. So you may want to pause the video here and capture that down. Capitalization counts, and all the fields are particular. It's a code, so definitely enter it exactly as you see it on the screen there. Again, click the green Create Message button, and now you've created both your messages. Now we just need to go in and assign those messages to the multiple situations. So go back, navigate to your survey. We called ours Engagement. We're going to go into Survey Flow. And then those end of survey blocks, that's where we want to customize the message. So by default, Qualtrics has its own code. We want to override that. So select Override Survey Options, then Custom End of Survey Message, and that's where you can select the message. You're going to go into your library and select either Decline, MTurk, or whatever you've titled your individual messages. So remember that this first end of survey block is for those that are not going to be taking the survey. So we want to make sure that we're choosing the correct message. So in this case, it's Decline. And then we'll click OK, and we'll customize the end of survey message when they do successfully complete it. So again, it's Override Survey Options, Custom, MTurk, your library, and then select the appropriate message. Save your flow, and you're done. Our last step is to conduct some survey testing. We want to make sure that our survey displays correctly, that the logic works, the survey flow works. We're looking for any spelling, grammatical errors. Basically just testing the survey to see that it performs as expected. So when we are in our survey window looking at the survey, we can go up and click that blue button there, Preview, and it's going to pull up an exact replica, exactly what our survey will look like to somebody that takes it. And because Qualtrics is available on mobile devices, you might want to click on that mobile view to see what your survey would look like on a mobile device. And then under the Tools menu, we can also select Ignore Validation. Now, sometimes you're going to want to fix something towards the end of your survey, and you're going to be doing repeated testing. It's helpful to click this on because basically what it does is it ignores the validation, as the name implies. So what that means is that you don't have to make a selection, even if you've set the survey to force responses. So it allows you to kind of move through the survey a lot faster and more rapidly without making each of those selections. Definitely helpful when you get to much longer surveys and you want to just see or preview something towards the very end. But for these purposes, we'll start with leaving that on and just kind of click through and take a look at our survey. The first thing we want to test is our bot check. So we will intentionally pick the wrong answer and select Next. And as we expect, we'll get that message that comes in and says, thank you for your time, but you don't currently meet the criteria. And then if we want to start again, just click that Restart Survey button, and it brings you right back to the beginning. You can try it again. So we'll select the correct answer this time, advance forward. It brings us to our IRB consent form. We'll test again here that Disagree button leads us to the unsuccessful completion of the survey. So we see that that's correct as well. We'll restart the survey again, correctly respond this time. And we get into our first survey question. Everything looks correct here. We're looking for any spelling and grammar checks, so just go through and read everything very carefully. Because we did not ignore validation and we forced responses to this question, we're going to go ahead and just put in responses just to advance the survey. And then we'll click the next button. Now we come to our instructional manipulation check. We can test the functionality here by not reading the instructions and submitting it. And our logic works correctly. We see that we have failed the attention check. That OK option is there if we want to continue, or we can exit the survey. If we try to advance without answering it, that logic again works correctly and tells us that we have a forced response situation. We need to respond to that question. So we'll click OK and continue the survey. We can see the rest. Again, these are forced responses, so we need to click each of these dots to advance the survey. And we get to our final question bank, our demographic questions. And we'll see that we can make our selections here. Advance, and there is our Qualtrics completion code. So we are verifying that that code we entered earlier with the messages is working correctly, and our Qualtrics survey code is coming back as we would expect with a randomly generated code. And with that, we'll conclude video number 2 in the quantitative survey series. Video number 3 will walk you through the process of uploading your survey to MTurk and getting all of your settings created there. So we will see you in the next video.